The poor choice of words, thrown at me instead of a greeting. At our family gathering just before my son's wedding was a baguette from a high-end French restaurant, laid out on a glass plate. Never had I imagined tasting such humiliation from my son's fiancée, whom I raised all by myself. However, this situation took an unexpected turn with the entrance of a man. Consequently, my in-laws ended up losing everything. My name is Sue, a 55-year-old housewife. My husband passed away early, and I raised my son Christopher on my own. This year, he turned 25, graduated from college, and found a job. Now, he's working hard as a professional, the pride of my life. He still lives with me at home in the house left by my late husband. I guess it's not wrong to want to spend more time with Christopher in this house. However, I was surprised earlier this year when he told me something unexpected. He had a girlfriend and was planning to marry her. At first, I was shocked. Christopher, introverted and shy, was always awkward with women. He couldn't even figure out what to do when he received chocolates on Valentine's Day during his student days. My son talking about marriage now made me incredibly happy. You have a girlfriend, and you're thinking of getting married. I'm so happy, I told him, expressing my true feelings. He seemed relieved and said he would bring her home soon. I was excitedly waiting, sure he would bring her quickly, but the opportunity didn't come. Feeling bad for rushing him, I asked about it. He smiled awkwardly, explaining it's hard to match their schedules. Apparently, it was hard to bring her due to her busy schedule. Instead, he shared a little about her. Her name is Roy. She's 4 years older than Christopher, which caught me by surprise and made me a bit worried. Finally, fate intervened. 2 months had flown by, and I was starting to feel like her absence was intentional. Then, by chance, I met Roy. It happened while I was enjoying lunch with a friend. The woman seated behind me began talking loudly about her upcoming wedding meeting the family, complaining about the hassle. She seemed to dislike the fact that the man was raised in a single-parent home and held his mom in high regard. She said, I'm delaying meeting her. I want to see how long Christopher will put up with it. I told him to prove he's not a mama's boy. She had indeed mentioned Christopher's name. I felt a slight dizziness, realizing the situation unfolding before me. I could hear her friend advising Roy to be more humble. That confirmed it. The woman talking loudly about her future mother-in-law behind me was Christopher's fiancé, Roy. My hand, holding the coffee cup, trembled. I was so disturbed that my friend asked if I was okay. After that, I ate the recommended dessert, but I can't recall what it was. I just wanted to leave that place as soon as possible. That was my only thought. Roy, unaware of my presence, continued to complain about her fiancé's family. She belittled the single-parent family, comparing it to her own educational background. She called me a clinging mother and talked about making Christopher abandon me after the wedding. Hearing all that, fear overcame my anger. The conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had begun even before the family meeting before the wedding. Yet she was the woman Christopher chose. There must be something wonderful about her. Back home, I tried to calm myself by thinking this. I couldn't bring myself to tell Christopher about this incident, and bored alone since that chance encounter with Roy, I stopped urging him about the family meeting. After all, I knew she had no intention of coming. There was no need to invite her. I didn't want to be continually looked down upon by being too accommodating. Christopher seemed a bit suspicious of my change of heart, but didn't press further. It's okay if you're busy. Whenever it's convenient for you, I told him. He is innocent in all this. I tried to ease his burden with my words. It seems the wedding plans between Christopher and Roy were progressing faster than the family meeting. Seeing a wedding venue brochure on the living room table, I realized the countdown to the wedding had begun. I wanted to speak up about the wrong order of things, but I refrained for my son's sake. If I started making a fuss, I'd be accused of being unable to let go or of being a mama's boy. Faceless accusations that would upset me. Indeed, Christopher is important to me, but he's an independent adult. I haven't interfered more than necessary. To prove that, I had to remain a tolerant mother. One of these days, there's a family meeting with the parents-in-law. They've reserved a fancy French restaurant. And I'd like you to come, Mom, Christopher suddenly said one morning. He had previously visited Roy's family, but they wanted to have a formal family meeting. The meeting was scheduled for 2 days later. The announcement came suddenly, and I felt a bit irritated. Shouldn't such things be planned after matching everyone's schedules? Again, I found myself having to hold back. All right, I haven't formally met Roy yet, so it's good to meet her sooner, I said, hiding my irritation. Christopher apologized, saying sorry for the sudden plan. I thought it was Roy and her family who should be apologizing, not him. I reassured him it's fine. On the day of the family meeting, Christopher and I went to the designated upscale French restaurant. I was a bit nervous as it was my first time at such a fancy place. Feels kind of nerve-wracking, doesn't it? Christopher chuckled. When we gave our name to the staff, we were guided to a private room. It seemed that Rui's family was already gathered there. Roy and her mother, Mara, were apparently present. "Excuse us," I said as I opened the door to the private room. Seated, there were Mara with a definite teacher vibe and Roy with slightly flashy makeup. Her demure dress didn't really match Roy's makeup. Probably Mara insisted on her wearing it for the family meeting. It didn't suit her at all. Roy and Mara didn't say a word until I finished my greetings. Furthermore, they scrutinized me from head to toe as if evaluating me. It was as if they had done me a favor by coming to listen to my greetings. I thought, this is the kind of daughter raised by such a mother. Since Christopher knew Mara, he said, "Long time no see." Indeed. I've been looking forward to meeting the famous mother. I've never had any connection with single mothers, Mara said with a laugh. There was a stain in her use of the term single mother. "Don't think that my daughter stole your precious son," she said with a refined laugh, saying something rather rude. Perhaps she was not even aware that she was being rude to her. This must be perfectly normal, not rude at all. I somehow managed to return a polite smile. "He's still inexperienced, but please take care of him," I said, playing it down. She nodded contentedly, behaving as if she was superior. I thought she must treat her students and their parents the same way. I wouldn't want such a teacher for my child. "Please have a seat." She invited me to sit down. Even at this point, Roy hadn't greeted me. She just looked at me with disdain. I had to resist the urge to pour the water on the table over her head. "Nice to meet you, Roy. I'm Christopher's mother." If we both remained silent, nothing would start. Reluctantly, I initiated the conversation. Then, Roy snorted in a mocking manner. "I know you just said that. I don't like people who repeat themselves. It's not efficient," she said arrogantly. My forehead vein twitched at her rude remark. Anger welled up inside me. But I couldn't afford to lose my temper here. She was the woman Christopher chose. I feigned calmness. "Oh, I see. I'll keep that in mind," I replied, forcing a smile. I felt like I was reaching my limit. Her father would be a bit late due to work, Mara had informed us. She suggested we start without him today. "Dad is running late." "You've never had such food because you were poor," Roy said to Christopher with a seemingly innocent smile. He just went along, unfazed. I always knew he was kind and patient, but this was beyond that. I worried a little about whether he could handle society. Was he being taken advantage of? I wondered with a parent's concern. "That's nice. Let's enjoy the feast, Christopher," I chimed in. Roy and Marcia wore unpleasant smiles. I couldn't understand why they were making such faces, but soon it became clear. Quietly, the door to the private room opened, and the first dish was brought in. On a beautifully decorated plate was the cuisine. I watched as the dishes were placed on the table one by one. True to a high-end French restaurant, the starters were visually stunning. Then a plate was gently placed in front of me. "Ah!" I couldn't help but exclaim upon seeing the dish in front of me. It was just a baguette on a glass plate. That was the reason behind Roy and Marcia's laughter. They seemed intent on mocking me to the fullest. I later learned that the owner of this upscale French restaurant was Marcia's brother. They had colluded to ridicule me. "The pour that suits you best," Roy said, laughing heartily while looking at my shocked expression. Mara, not saying a word, covered her mouth with a handkerchief. She was probably hiding a vulgar smile behind it. I couldn't take it anymore. Even Christopher seemed to turn pale at this situation. "Is that so? This suits a poor person like me, does it?" I muttered Roy's words. I was looking down, trying to contain my anger. Roy, seeing me, bowed. She must have thought I was crying. "Sophie, crying over the truth isn't logical," she said, laughing even harder. Normally, Mara would be expected to scold Roy for such rudeness. But she just said, "Oh dear, Roy," with no intention of scolding her. I inadvertently let out a sigh. At that moment, the door opened and Roy's father entered, apologizing for his lateness. He looked back and forth between Roy, laughing heartily, and me, bowed down. He then caught sight of the baguette in front of me and gasped. He seemed unable to comprehend the situation. "What's this about?" he asked Roy, sounding a bit panicked. She proudly explained the situation. "Dad, this is Christopher's mother, raised in poverty." I thought she wouldn't have experienced a fancy French restaurant baguette, so I had it specially prepared, she said. He scolded her, saying, "What are you talking about? That's taking the joke too far." But he couldn't hide his amusement. Deep down, he must have been mocking us too. The idea of such parents and their daughter becoming my family was unbearable. I slowly raised my bowed head. At that moment, his eyes widened in sheer surprise, his face turning pale very quickly. "Cedric, long time no see," I said, somewhat surprised myself because I knew him. "Principal?" he exclaimed in shock. "I have been the principal of a private high school for 3 years. When a close friend's father passed away, he bequeathed this role to me. I was entrusted with the legacy of bringing new winds to the school. Reforming the school was no easy task, but I had the determination and perseverance from raising Christopher alone. I slowly but surely adjusted customs and brought fresh ideas. The teacher who was always harsh on me was Cedric, Roy's father. This insult from your daughter, I will never forget. Instead of loudly talking about the school's educational policies, maybe you should pay more attention to education at home," I said, staring him down. He had always berated me, saying a single mother can't be a principal. He even spread rumors that I couldn't properly educate my own child. "Hey, what does that mean? Sophie is Dad's boss." Seeing Cedric turn pale, Roy seemed to realize the magnitude of what she had done. Marcia was trembling, lost for words. I looked at each member of Roy's family and slowly bit into the baguette. The sound of me crunching the baguette echoed in the room. Delicious, as expected of a high-end French restaurant's baguette. "How about it, Cedric?" I offered, smiling as I held out the glass plate with the baguette. His hand trembled amusingly as he took it. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'd always separate work and personal life. Your dismissal has always been a topic at the board meetings. I was the one opposing it after all. Without a rival, there's no momentum for reform. But your role ends here." That was a final warning for him. In fact, I had evidence of his accepting bribes from parents during admissions, manipulating interviews. He was enjoying a luxurious life with that money, dining at upscale French restaurants, and driving luxury cars. I was still deciding whether to pursue criminal charges. If he left the school quietly, I was willing to let it go. "Christopher, let's go home. She may be this kind of lady, but can you still see her as a marriage partner? I won't stop you if you choose her," I said to Christopher, whose gaze was fixed on the baguette Cedric held to him. Roy, with a strange smile, whispered, "You'll marry me, right?" Thinking marrying him was her only way to save Cedric's position, her pleading eyes turned to him. He looked down, gripping his hands on his knees. "The engagement is off. This marriage is as if it never happened," he declared. "It's just a joke. I didn't mean to mock you." "It's a joke, Christopher." "You're so stiff." Roy desperately tried to cover up. If that wasn't mockery, then what was? I was amazed she couldn't come up with a better excuse. He looked at Roy with an unexpectedly cold gaze. Roy, you've been given a lot by your parents, education and love. But I believe I received even more from my mom. Seeing her work was cool. She's still cool, he declared. He could never forgive her for mocking me. He expressed pity for the students she was teaching. I wouldn't want to be taught by someone like her. I heard bad rumors about you but chose to believe otherwise. You betrayed that trust, he said, causing tears to stream down Roy's face. She seemed to finally understand the irreversible damage done. What's most necessary for you now is to reflect on how things came to this. We probably won't see each other again, but I hope you grow. As Christopher and I were about to leave the private room, Cedric grabbed his shoulder to stop him. Christopher shook off his hand as if it were something filthy. I've been patient, but let me say this clearly. What's wrong with being raised by a single mother? Did you see Roy's vulgar behavior? Raised by respectable parents, you should be more ashamed, he said firmly. Cedric had no response and looked down in shame. Roy's cries echoed in the private room as we left the restaurant. The moment we stepped outside the restaurant, we heard Cedric's angry voice. He was probably yelling at Roy. Christopher, you need to be more discerning in choosing women. When I said that, he scratched his head and said, It's embarrassing. Apparently, Roy had aggressively pursued him. He tends to be easily swayed. Roy probably saw that in him. Anyway, it's good everything came out before the marriage. As we went home, I said, feeling relieved, the engagement was annulled. Roy demanded compensation, but Christopher dismissed it. He logically explained to his lawyer that Roy was entirely to blame for the broken engagement, and the compensation demand was dropped. When threatened with a lawsuit, she quickly backed down. Her parents must have advised her not to make things worse. Though I keep work and personal life separate, Cedric had to leave the school. The bribery issue during admissions was about to become public. Faced with leaving quietly or going to court, he chose the former, an expected choice. Now unemployed, he's desperately seeking a new job. But bad rumors spread fast in the same industry. It's unlikely many schools would hire a teacher with such a reputation. He's at a difficult crossroads deciding whether to continue teaching or find a new job. Roy resigned from her tutoring job. Having bragged about getting married, the broken engagement left her too embarrassed to face her colleagues and students. I heard she couldn't stand to teach towards the end due to stress. Currently, she is reportedly confined to a room in her parents' house, not even seeking a new job. I heard from the lawyer that she is too embarrassed to even walk around the neighborhood. While I feel a bit sorry for her, it's her responsibility. Marcia, burdened with 2 unemployed adults, is reportedly preparing for divorce. If she couldn't live as luxuriously as before, she wanted to use her earnings solely for herself, which was her reason for divorce. Logical perhaps, but abandoning one's family for such a reason ultimately led to the family's downfall. All I can do is hope that she, having lost everything, will recover on her own. Today, sometime after the incident, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in a while. Christopher introduced me to a wonderful woman. The woman he introduced to me is a single mother working at the same place as him. She has a daughter who was about to turn 3. It seems she was the one who lifted Christopher's spirits after his broken engagement with Roy. She was very bright and sunny, and her daughter is also fond of Christopher. It looks like I might even become a grandmother. Despite the roundabout journey, I'm slightly relieved that Christopher seems to be on his way to building a happy family.